I'm back in the sewing room today, and this will be the final video for the autumn braided table runner. And today I'll show you how to square up the table runner and add the binding. And for the binding fabric, I'm using the same fabric that I used for the backing. So let's get started. The table runner is completely quilted. I'll just pan down so you can see. To get the table runner ready for the binding, I'll need to cut away the excess backing and fusible fleece and square up the table runner. You'll need a ruler and a rotary cutter. You'll notice after the quilting is completed on the table runner, the sides are no longer perfectly straight. They get distorted from all the stitching. So I'll use my ruler and I'll line it up at the 2-inch mark. And I'll line it up at the seam of my inner border. There's my 2. Make sure it's matched up here as well. And I'll go ahead and trim the table runner right along here, and you can see how distorted the edge is. There's just a little fabric showing here and quite a bit through here. So that's the first cut that I'll make. I'll use my scissors and just snip off this bottom. I'll pull the table runner down, reposition, and repeat that same exact process. Again, inner seam line of the border matched up with the 2-inch mark on my ruler. I'll reposition and do it again. To determine how long you need your binding strips to be, all you do is measure the sides and the ends of the table runner and then add an extra 15 inches to account for turning the corners and giving yourself wiggle room when you're sewing on the binding. For this table runner, you'll need about 157 inches. The other thing you can do if you really don't want to measure is just use your table runner as a guide. Place your strips all around the table runner and then add 15 inches to that. I have my binding strips all prepared, and all I did was simply cut, again, 2.5-inch strips, folded in half, wrong sides together, pressed, and I joined the strips using the same exact technique I used for joining the border strips. Here's a seam. For this binding today, I'll be attaching the binding to the front of the table runner. And I'm matching up raw edge to raw edge. There's my folded edge there. I've secured it with a pin. I'll take it to the sewing machine. I'll leave about a 6-inch tail here. And I'll begin sewing right about here with 1/4 inch, and then we'll stop and I'll show you how to go around the corner. I have my 1/4-inch foot on, and I'm starting about 3/4 of the way down one of the sides of the table runner. And again, a 1/4-inch seam all the way down to the corner, and then we'll stop. Coming up to my first corner, and what I want to do is stop sewing about 1/4 inch from my corner. That looks about right, and again, tie off. And remove it from underneath the presser foot. Now fold your binding strip up so you have a diagonal fold right here. Bring your binding strip back down. So now there's a fold right here as well. Again, 1/4 inch seam, and make sure you tack down your stitches when you begin. I'm coming up to my next corner. I'll show you that fold again. Again, I want to stitch to about 1/4 inch away from my end. Tie off. Fold up, you have your diagonal. Bring your binding right back down. Your fold here. Begin stitching right here, 1/4 inch seam. I'm coming up to where I started, so I'm going to go ahead and tie off, and I'll show you how to join the ends. With my original tail that I left, all I'm going to do is fold it down. It's about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. I'm going to use my seam roller. This is from Violecraft, and just get it really firm so I can really see that, and I know my arm is in the way, so I can really make a crease. I'll repeat that with my other tail. All I'll do is meet up with my folded piece. Meet them up like so. Again, crease that fold. All I've done is traced a line with this water-soluble disappearing ink pen along the fold, and this will be my stitching line. I don't know how good that comes across in the camera. And I'll repeat that with the other tail. There's my crease mark. Open it up to the wrong side. Kind of pencil it in like so. Now I'll pin these two right sides together, so I'll just open up that tail. There's my line. Open up this tail, and then all I'm doing is matching up these two lines. And you kind of do, it's a little awkward, but just match them up. That looks pretty good. And place a pin. And I'll repeat that on the bottom just so it's nice and secure. And I just kind of look back and forth, make sure they're lined up, and pin. Now I'll sew right down this line. I'll remove my pin. Make sure everything's nice and smooth. And again, you want to secure your stitch. and tie off. Now I'll just use my scissors and trim off the excess binding. Just even with my other piece of binding. Now I will just kind of give that seam a finger press open and refold my binding. Line it up, put it back under the presser foot, and continue sewing to where I started. To secure the binding to the back of the table runner, I'll use a combination of a fabric glue pen, this one is from Sewline, and straight pins. I'll flip my binding to the back. And what I try to do is have the edge showing on the front as even as I can all the way around the table runner. And then I also kind of check here on the back to make sure it's somewhat even going around the back as well. So I'll take my glue pen, put some glue there, and I like to start in the middle of the top or the side. And then I'll take my straight pin, and I like to use these really small pins that have a very small head. And I go right at the edge. And I do a nice long bite there. Again, I check the front, make sure it looks even. Check the back, put a dab of glue. That looks pretty good. And pin. Now I'm coming up to my corner, so I'll put a dab of glue right near my corner. And sometimes you just have to play around with this to get it to look the way you want. Make sure this part is even here. Look on the other side. That looks pretty good. I'll show you another corner, and sometimes it's nice to kind of leave a gap here and come back and pin that later when you're doing your corners. So I'll use my glue stick, put a dab of glue there. Check, make sure I have the same amount on each side. And now I'll come back and do a pin right along here. Here's how it looks on the back with all the pins in place. And before I begin sewing, I'll just show you the front. And again, what I was aiming for is to have an even amount of the binding showing on the front. Doesn't have to be perfect, but that looks pretty neat. To sew the binding down, I'll sew from the front, and I'll be sewing right in the ditch, right here, and I'm using invisible thread. I'll begin by pulling my bobbin thread to the top. And it's a little hard to see, but I was able to grab it. I'll tuck it up out of the way. And I'll do my best to stay right in this seam line right here. And I make sure I pull my pins out as I go. Keep it nice and flat and continue on. As I'm coming up to the corner, I just slow down and try to get my needle right into the corner. I think I'll use my hand wheel. And then I'll pivot and continue on. The last thing I'll do is bury these threads from when I pulled up my bobbin thread in the beginning. And I'm using a self-threading needle. I know this is all really hard to see because the thread is the invisible thread. So I've just made a little knot. I'm pulling it down about 1/4 of an inch away from my fabric. I'll thread both of the threads onto the needle. I'll put my needle back in right near where the threads are coming out and then pop it back out about 1/2 inch away, making sure my needle is not showing on the back. Pull it through. Pull both of them through. The knot is buried in there. Trim them off, and it's hidden. You can see by using that invisible thread and stitching in the ditch through here that it is virtually invisible. And that's how it looks on the back. There's your corner, and that's how the corner looks on the front. Here's the completed table runner. I love the colors, and there's so many beautiful fall fabrics this time of year. So I really hope you give this project a try. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.